Welcome, all you Trekkies, to our Tissue Test, the Final Frontier of Tissue Testing webinar.
Audio Jungle.
Today we're going to explore how real-time tissue testing is going to reshape agriculture. I have on the call with me today, on my Starship Enterprise, Jarrett Chambers from ATP Nutrition, our logical, analytical, and detail-oriented Vulcan. Can you do the live long and prosper, Jarrett?
Sure, live long and prosper. Oh.
You are out of practice?
Out of practice. We'll try this hand. That's better.
It looks great. Welcome to the call. Welcome to the call. We have Dimitris Scotty Talidis from 4R Agronomy, who's our innovative, resourceful, and adept problem solver. How are you doing today, Dimitris?
I'm good. Thank you very much for inviting me to this discussion, and have a good day to everyone.
Perfect. And we have Terry Bones Aberhart from Aberhart Farms, our compassionate, focused on well-being and practical approach doctor of the ship. How are you doing today, Bones?
Good and awesome.
And I'm your host, Captain Dan Kirk Aberhart. I love to run around to strange new worlds and, I guess get into various, trouble with the locals, all over the galaxy, if you will. So today we're going to be talking about tissue testing. We are going to cover the foundations of that and a little bit of the background and history and how it's currently being implemented and what is digitization going to do to tissue testing. And I just want to set the foundation here for reminding folks that Aberhart Ag offers free tissue testing for all of our biosol acres to all of our valued customers, our VIPs. It's just a great opportunity to verify the results of biosol on the farm. And we're committed to that process that we've been doing for years and years and years now. And we've got this collection of thousands of tissue tests across the network. And so we cover the cost at A&L Labs. We have a business account that all of our dealers and customers have access to. So that's really why we're talking about this today. And we've been educated by many of the folks that we've worked with over the years on the value of tissue testing. But today's conversation is really about growing this in a new direction. And I wanted to relate this. I know we've got some Peter Diamandis fans on the call here. And if we think about Peter Diamandis' 6 Ds of exponential growth in terms of the conversation today, first, digitization. We are going to move from a traditional manual tissue testing method to digital tissue testing. This is a big game changer. That's what we're going to talk about here today. Next, deception. This might be moving deceivingly slow, but it is going to rapidly gain traction, and we're going to be moving at warp speed here shortly with the growth of the pie of this digital tissue testing. And next, disruption. Well, I like to think of disruption more as transformation and growing the pie bigger, but no doubt all of this is going to change how we do business, how we do agriculture, how we treat the crop. Then we have demonetization. The cost of this digital tissue testing is going to go down over time. You're going to be able to do more for less cost per unit of tissue testing. Dematerialization means that digital methods will replace the physical ones. And I was wondering if this won't be coming to our phones one day or our tricorders, whatever planet you're on. And then finally, democratization, which I know Jarrett Chambers is a big democracy guy, geopolitically. We want digitized tissue testing for all folks in all worlds, across all galaxies, across the Federation. So everyone will have access to tissue testing. So with that, let's get to it with our panelists today. And I'd really like to start just to get a little bit of a perspective and context for each of you. What has tissue testing done for your business in the past? Where are we at with it today? And then we'll start to unpack where we're going with it. So Jarrett, you've been swooping around the galaxy for a couple decades now. You're a veteran, very logical, intelligent guy from a race of people that have no emotions and just discern scientific data. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from on the history and the implementation of tissue testing thus far before we get into the future.
Okay, thanks, Dan, and thanks for allowing me to put some time into your podcast here today. Tissue testing. 20 years ago, I spent 10 years in the fresh produce market in the Western United States, worked on 20 to 30 different crops, also spent that same time in the professional turf industry. And in those places, there was a lot of very intensive nutrient management using both soil and tissue testing as the drivers. When we started up ATP, we were fortunate to work actually with Copenhagen University, who had developed a real-time tool to determine the manganese concentration in leaves in real time. They also developed it for phosphorus, and it actually was a very valuable tool. But ultimately, the goal there was, how do we take the experiences that I had from these higher value crops and translate them and transfer them into broadacre crops, row crops, small grain cereals, and oilseeds, where there's an opportunity to improve on what we're doing here right now. And again, tissue testing is vital, but we know that the number of acres overall are not nearly where we want them. And again, we just got to think about what's a different way to get onto these acres, as again, at the end of the day, try to manage our single largest variable investment, which is plant nutrition, which is fertilizer. And so, we've been turning over a lot of stones over the years. A lot of them they don't develop anywhere. The ones from Copenhagen did, but they were specific to an individual nutrient. And so again, that has its limitations. But again, now I think we're on, and we'll talk about it later, Dan. I think we're on path here to actually look at a tool that can complement traditional tissue testing to really ultimately drive productivity for the producer.
So 20 years ago, you're working with it in high value crops. When did you start to see it migrate into the broadacre sphere, would you say? How old is it in Western Canada?
I'm still waiting for it to happen. So except for Dimitri, who's here, again, who I know is not the normal guy. That's a compliment, Dimitri. But
I think so. I hope so.
Again, nothing against what's being done. I mean, there is some tissue testing being done right now, but to the extent relative to the investment that people are putting into a crop, relative number of acres being treated, there's nothing but blue sky. There's nothing but opportunity out there.
Well, let's start the revolution today.
Okay.
And in the numbers that we've spoken about, is probably 1 to 5% of folks are tissue testing. And then how do you break that down by acre? Obviously, there's a lot of room to run on this technology. Dimitris, where does it fit into your business in the past? How do you see it today? I know you're on the cusp of starting to use this new technology, but what does tissue testing look like on your planet so far here in Manitoba?
No, I'm just curious about the number you mentioned, 1 to 5% in North America or in Canada? Like
Jarrett, do you had some data on that?
Again, you have to break out the potato acres and you have to break out the more intensively managed crops. So if you look at the small grain cereals, row crops, oil seeds, it's a very, very small number that's being sampled.
And I can agree with that, because like we see that not every farmer is doing soil sampling. So imagine how many of these farmers, they're doing tissue sampling. It's even less. For me, tissue testing is crucial. We as agronomists, we like to debate a lot. We like to talk a lot. We like to agree, and we love to disagree, especially about fertility programs. And I'm sure that if you have in a room 10 agronomists and you give them one soil test report, they will come up with 10 different fertility plans. I'm sure about that. And each one of the agronomists will be fanatic about their approach. And this is what we see now. There are some very strong opinions about what needs to be done about fertility. And the best way to evaluate your fertility plan is by having a tissue test. It's like a blood test that we humans do. And it gives you the information you need to know if your fertility plan is in place or not. I have started doing tissue testing the last 6-7 years, and I do it on each one of my fields. I've realized that we need more than one time to test the fields. Just by tissue testing once per year, it's not enough. So we need to find ways to do it multiple times of the year, depending on the weather conditions, depending how the crop looks like. And we need to find a way to do it with economical way. As an agronomist, I have realized I have learned so many things about plants by doing tissue sampling. We know some nutrients are available at specific times of the season, or some nutrients are available when the conditions are wet or dry. That helps you to become way more efficient when you design a fertility plan. And to me, tissue testing is a tool to prove to my clients that our fertility approach is on the right way. So I will keep doing it, and I cannot wait to see in the future how this tissue testing can become more digitalized, as you said, Dan. And imagine in the future having access to tissue testing like in a weekly basis. That will be fantastic. But then we have to decide how can we use this information for our benefit. I want to encourage every farmer, every agronomist to start doing tissue sampling multiple times of the year, and they will learn so many things. It's amazing how many things you can learn about your fields and about your crops and about your fertility plan.
I think the most shocking part of this webinar so far is your first statement, Dimitris, is that there isn't one big ubiquitous truth in agronomy. I mean, you're trying to tell me here today on today's webinars that agronomists don't agree? I think we'd have a bunch of agronomists on the call today that disagree with that statement.
We disagree more than the politicians, I think.
Well, let's try and make agronomy great again on that note.
Oh, geez.
Terry, you're old. You've been around a long time. You're younger than me, but you're still old. You've been tissue testing probably as long as anybody in Western Canada. What's your view on this, and why did you guys start, and what's it look like on Aberhart Farms?
We started tissue testing probably over 20 years ago, actually, before I even started the agronomy business. At that time, anyone I talked to didn't really even know where to send the tissue test to get it analyzed. It took a little while to figure that out. As an agronomist and a farmer, just wanted to know initially, are you putting on the right amount of fertilizer, or too much or too little? And the reality is today we're probably, as the guys said earlier here, putting on anywhere between $100 up to $250, $300 worth of inputs into a field, right? Fertilizer, depending on what kind of crop you're growing. You're also hoping to produce probably $600 to $1,000 an acre of revenue or more, depending on the crop. And so, on a 5,000 acre farm, that's $3-4 million worth of revenue you're hoping to achieve by managing your crop and the fertility. And so spending a little bit of time to figure out if you're doing the right things probably has some value. And obviously soil sampling is kind of the basis of building a plan, a fertility plan, and a crop plan. But without checking in season up on that plan, it's kind of like planning out a big long road at a year-long journey and starting to drive and not looking at your map or where you're going again until the combine hits the field. And then if it's not quite what you thought, or you didn't end up where you thought you were going to be, you kind of wonder what happened, right? And so there's still lots to learn about tissue testing, but I think, as the guys mentioned, the more you do it, the more you learn, the more things you understand, maybe what you don't understand and need to learn more about. But it just gives you a reference guide to, are you going in the right direction? Again, soil testing and crop plans it's great science. It's very fundamental, but there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of assumptions in that, and having a reference just helps confirm whether your assumptions are close or you need to make some adjustments on that.
Okay, well, that's a little bit of a nice overview. Jarrett, I can see you've got lots to share. Where did you want to go with this, Jarrett? We could start to get into the advancements and then talk about what we can do with those. Is that where you want to go, Jarrett?
First of all, I love what Terry and Dimitri said, and really want to reiterate and build off that. If we look at some of the experiences that I've seen over the years, is you look at in content, maybe not with the laboratories, but with other groups, where they do one tissue test, and it's a report card on how your fertilizer worked. And you really, I mean, it's been in print. You use it for next year's planning. That is so inaccurate. That is so not what a tissue test is. I mean, my goodness. I mean, tissue test, you get tissue tests in real time. You do multiple samples. You do a minimum of 3. Dimitris, right? If you should be doing it every week. That's probably not practical. But I mean, we got 3 key stages in the plant's life cycle that we can deal with it. Let's get on it early. Let's see how that starter fertilizer worked, or we missed our starter fertilizer. Let's address it while we're still establishing, maybe number of spikelets per head, maybe number of heads per plant type of idea. Then prior to reproduction, let's get in there and let's sample old and new leaves. I mean, when you start sampling old and new leaves, it will blow your mind what is actually going on in that plant. And then if you really want to do it properly at that time, grab a soil sample. The tissue sample is going to tell you how well your fertility programs work. Dimitri referred to that. Now, of course, if you have the old versus the old is actually going to tell you what the plant is going to eventually evolve to, especially for the mobile nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium. Those deficiencies show up in the youngest part of the plant first. Historically, people are saying only sample the newest part of the leaf. Very accurate. But again, we've seen it over and over again that you can have N and P and K deficiencies lower on. If you don't capture that in the leaf, again, that's why people don't see value in tissue testing. That's why they're not repeating it. Then you grab a soil sample at that time, and now it can show you what the soil is going to be able to supply that plant as it goes into reproduction. Then you hit it again in reproduction. And there's a few people that are doing multiple samples, old and new leaves, throughout the season. And they're actually now, as Terry and Dimitri have referred to, now they're actually seeing, holy cow, not only am I learning, I'm actually being able to be much more proactive in addressing this year's crop rather than just saying, hey, let's use those for next year's crop. I think that's really critical. The other thing that Terry alluded to that I wanted to build off is, again, tissue sampling, really important for nutrient ratios in the plant. We do know that a lot of people focus on one nutrient and they focus way too much on that one nutrient, and either be nitrogen. And what an opportunity with tissue testing to start looking at these ratios and start looking at, over fertilizer nitrogen can trigger a lot of challenges. And again, if you just grab a new leaf and you look at the new leaf, you're not going to capture it. So start looking at ratios, old and new leaves. And now we start looking at, we start becoming plant nutritionists. And last time I checked, we're growing crops. And so we got to be moving from soil scientists and crops people to plant nutrition people. So I'll stop talking. And I just really
fired up.
Dimitri and Terry.
I'm fired up. We've only mapped 5% of the ocean. How much of fertility do we actually know if we're getting NPK right? Like we're in the stadium, as Elston Solberg would say. But if you can take snapshots over time with no incremental increase in costs, and yes, there's some time associated with it, but you start to see this moving pattern, and you start to understand the interaction between what's in the soil and the plants, the old leaves and the new leaves. And we know some nutrients are mobile in plants and they're not mobile in the soil, and vice versa. We're in a whole new galaxy, a whole new star system, which gets me excited as a 9 quick start. Jarrett, what are we talking about here? What is going on? What is the disruptor, the demonetizer, the democratizer, the deceptive technology that's moving under the waves here that's going to emerge? Boom, we're going to see some digitization. Tell us about it.
So we've been working since 2018 on some near infrared technology, and actually in a handheld device. Near infrared technology is, maybe been used in the animal feed industry for 40 to 50 years. Every animal feed company out there actually has near infrared technology, and they're actually measuring the quality of the feed that they are feeding the animals. So this is not new technology. It's been out there a long time. And of course, with the power of computing, the power of algorithms, the modeling capabilities, all the AI machine learning, plus the technology, we've been able to take that near infrared, put it into a handheld device, and actually be able to calibrate relative to the traditional wet chemistry labs and get the nutrient status of a plant in under 2 minutes. And so the idea there is to actually build off and complement what's been being done right now in the tissue sampling world, but now to scale it at a level that makes sense, to go into that field. You're looking, earlier on, you're looking at for weeds, you're looking at insects, you're looking at disease pressure. You grab your plants, and again, your tissue sampling is going to be very specific. You got different strategies that you can work on. But then you're going to grab those plants, you're going to go back to the tailgate of your truck, you're going to scan those leaves, you're going to get the results within 2 minutes, and you're going to say, hey, things are looking great. Let's give her because some rain's coming, or we're out of nutrient balance. We need to address it now. I mean, that's the game changer, to be able to react quickly, which again, that's the way the world is going, and ag is going that way too. And I think this is a tool to really build off great science. I mean, tissue sampling is great science. Now we have to be able to convert that science into something practical. And I've said to you before, to Dan, many times before, there's great technologies out there, but that doesn't mean they're always great products. And I think a great product is something that's got to be easy to use. It's got to be fast. It's got to be simple. We got to be sure that it is calibrated with consistency. And again, it is a diagnostic tool. The NIR technology is not as accurate as ICP. It's not as accurate as a wet chemistry lab. But again, if we get it close to where we're looking versus having no data, that's probably a better step to take than actually having no data.
Okay, Jarrett. So we've got transponders, we've got the holodeck, we've got faster than light travel, we've got things that make our meals automatically on the Starship Enterprise. But how does this tissue testing technology work? What's the mechanism behind this space age technology?
So it's basically spectroscopy. This is this not my area of expertise, but really it's just a spectral reading where the near infrared light comes back. It actually creates some type of, and I'm going to use the word reflectance. And of course, the spectral people will be mad at me for that. That's maybe not the right word. It comes back into the machine and it captures all these different wavelengths. And now the key, and all these different peaks at these different wavelengths that actually happen in that near infrared window. So you get all these peaks all the time. But then the key thing is, what does that peak mean? And if you actually think about maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, when they were calibrating an ICP, which is used in every lab today, you have all these peaks. And at that time, 60 years ago, whatever that time frame was, those peaks didn't mean anything until you calibrate and you actually learn what they are. So this is the great thing with the spectral work. You're getting these reflectance, you're getting these peaks that are happening. Now, what we've done intentionally is we've actually said, let's grow plants under 5 different nutrient levels per nutrient. So optimum and then suboptimum, and you keep going down. And now you actually have this very nice linear range from very deficient, adequate, and high. And you've grown them that way. Then you actually scan these leaves. You get this reflectance. Now they're just peaks. What do they mean? Now you actually correlate them to wet chemistry analysis. So now you can actually say that number actually means that we have 4.2% nitrogen in the plant, or we have 25 ppm boron in the plant. And then it correlates to what people are comfortable with, which is the numbers that they're comfortable with. So ultimately, you're trying to have consistent reflectance on that plant, and you're trying to and as accurate as possible. And what we've driven to is controlling the plants that we grow so that we can get these very linear lines as they're correlated to wet chemistry lab. And ultimately, you have lows and highs and everything in between. And now, as you scan more, the machine learning can kick in, and then actually it remembers that peak, and it actually can create that value in the field. Rather than using chemical and a chemical extraction, you're using near infrared wavelengths and actually getting the reflectance coming back into the machine.
So it works.
We got to be, it's NIR technology has been proven for a long time. The feed industry uses it. We're using it in the soil sector. Now the plant calibration, again, it's not new. It's new, but it's not, because we're using the animal feed industry as our backdrop, as our platform, as our history to know where we're going.
Okay. Well, I'll trust you on this one, Jarrett. You give a convincing argument, but I want to talk to some of the skeptics in a minute here, but we're kind of at the halfway mark here. I just want to mention to all the Trekkies on the call that you're welcome to share in the Q&A any questions that you have. We welcome any comments. We did get a comment here from Wayne Black that agreed that as agronomists, we agree that we do need to do more tissue sampling. So yes, Dimitri, we can agree. So we did get some folks in agronomy to agree on something today. It seems like a big win if we're counting our wins halfway through here. But yeah, please, we're looking for some interaction, and we got lots of great agronomists. Let's have some debate. Let's have some interaction, some chats here. But Terry and Dimitris, could you folks kindly play a little bit of devil's advocate here? Because I know I've talked to a lot of agronomists that, see this technology come into market and they have a lot of reservations, a lot of objections. Folks in your camps might be concerned about accuracy and the viability and is it for real? And especially on the soil testing side, I think the tissue testing side seems a little less like voodoo and people aren't quite as afraid of it, but the soil testing side for sure. Where do you guys stand on your reservations about this coming to market? And I know both of you are getting into this arena now. And we'll probably have 10 to 20 units sold as a result of this webinar. So it's proliferating. But what do you guys, Dimitris, what do you guys have for reservations, or what are you skeptical about, or what are you concerned about, or maybe perhaps you could speak on behalf of all agronomists that always agree on everything?
Yeah, well, for me, is a tool that can make your life easier. For Elston, and Jarrett mentioned that it's not as accurate as a wet lab, so as a lab. So you expect to be, as Elston always says, on 80% inside the stadium. So you have a good idea where you are. This technology will only become more accurate as we go forward. And the reason I wanted to start from now is it gives me the freedom of the time. Like, it's extremely valuable to have a tissue test in a matter of minutes. As Jarrett said, I have tried it already, so it takes maybe less than a minute to have a report. And also, you can use this technology to test different parts of the field at the same time. And quite often for me, when it comes to the tissue sampling in season, like when we have, let's say we have some canola fields and we want to determine if we have to apply boron or not, the farmer wants an answer in a day or two. And you have limitations. When you have to take the tissues, send them to the lab, you have to wait at least 2-3 days to have the report back. With this technology, you have it right away. And even if it is not 100% accurate, you can check different parts of the field at the same day, so you can have a very good understanding where you are. And most of another valuable thing is you can even use this technology to identify shortages before even they appear. And it is very important. We have nutrient deficiencies and we have zero symptoms. But when you have access to a technology like NutriScan, you can go and make lots of testing and you can identify all these deficiencies and you can act. So there is lots of value in my opinion. And I can fight the fact that it's not 100% accurate with more testing. And my wife is a math teacher, like she likes statistics. I want to be 80% and more on the right side. So this is my plan for this season.
Getting beyond the scope of agronomy here now, we're getting into romantic relationships, which is kind of a 90-degree angle. I don't know if we want to go into, but
everything is about statistics, right? Like if you have 8 tests and like 80-90% of the test gives you the same thing, then this is what's happening. It's matter of statistics, and that's the power of this technology. You can have as many tests as you want. So if you are not sure about one report, you can just repeat it. With with sending I had this limitation in the past. Like in the past, quite often I was not very happy with the report from a lab, and you cannot just repeat it. Like it's going to take another 5 days to have the report back. Just to mention here, I will still use the scanner and I will still use the lab just to convince myself, first of all, that we are on the same page with these technologies. So that's my plan.
Okay, well, we got two arguments for Terry. Mm-hmm. This is getting to be a heated debate. I know I don't think you like conflict. I know it's getting raucous in here. What are you going to tell us?
Getting crazy. I think there's kind of two aspects of this in my mind. There's just sometimes there's some reservation around tissue testing, just as a whole, right? And understanding that, and I think like anything, it's just you have to do a lot of stuff to learn and just to get into it. And there's a lot of questions that are known. I think a lot of times in agronomy as a whole, we get stuck trying to answer everything to perfection. And if it's not there, we're unsatisfied or unhappy and still asking questions. But we just have to remember that, hey, if we know more than we did yesterday, that's good. And some simple examples of that, 10 years ago, we analyzed over 1,000 tissue tests from our client base and realized that out of 1,000 tissue tests, none of them were deficient in nitrogen except for one, which was a pea crop that wasn't nodulated. And over 65% of them were low in potassium and over 50% of them were low in phosphorus. So from a large aggregate of data, it shows us that, hey, we're over managing nitrogen and we're not managing these other nutrients enough. And we've shown, like Jarrett's talked about, where when we put too much nitrogen on a field, we actually cause a yield decrease, which very few farmers, I think, realize or understand. And that really sucks as a farmer to spend more money to lower the yield of your crop. That's not very much fun and not very productive. So there's some very simple things like that. And also what we've done is we've evolved from kind of taking that one tissue test a year, whereas we'll take one field and we'll test it 3 or 4 times throughout the year to start, getting trends. And largely tissue testing has been kind of a looking forward exercise of what you could change next year, because a lot of times we don't get the information back in time to react. And this is what's maybe exciting about getting more real-time information. It's like the Google map of understanding where the traffic jam is right now versus looking at the paper map and not realizing you're going to drive downtown Toronto and be stuck there for 2 hours. So now when we look at the NRI technology in sampling, this theoretically is something a bit new to this area of agriculture. I had an opportunity a few years ago to work with one of the guys that was also developing a similar technology. There's probably 10 or 20 companies around the world now that are bringing similar type tools using NRI analysis. So this is not just a one-off thing. And this guy had been part of developing the product that John Deere bought to analyze the manure and forage analysis in real time, right? So this has been used. And so from what I understand from the work that I did there is it's really a matter of getting the calibration and the data. So whoever has the most data will kind of figure it out all eventually and be more accurate. The readings are very consistent. It's the interpretation of the readings, the algorithms, and the stuff that takes a bit of time to calibrate. But the readings are quite accurate to whatever they're showing. So I think that this does have potential. Getting that data in real time, getting as much data as we can will be valuable, and we'll start to develop a better understanding of that over time. And that's really, I guess, my kind of focus and goal for farmers and in agronomy is we have a plethora of data that's coming at us. And sometimes there's so much data, we don't even know where to start or what to do with it. But we need these tools and systems and software to simplify it So we can start making more decisions in real time off of data, not, off of your gut or whether you think the crop has enough water or not, or has enough nutrients or not. And see what those results are over time as you see how your crop yields and pick up those things. So I think there's a lot of potential here, and this is one of the next things that's going to help us just do a better job and get more aggregated data over time that we can make better decisions with.
Well, I know you've got a lot to share on what's been said here, Jarrett. Obviously, hope it's okay to agree to disagree here on the call today, obviously. But one thing I really thought about a lot, and Terry alluded to it, about knowing what's in your tank on a long trip. I mean, if you're looking down at your fuel gauge and it's broken and you got a 10-hour trip and you don't have a good feel for how far that vehicle can go, that causes a lot of anxiety. And we think about Uber versus a taxi. What causes anxiety when you're waiting for a taxi is not knowing where it is and when it's going to get there and where you got to be. Uber shows you where it is, when it's coming, and that's why it's so fantastically popular. So knowing where fertility is at, knowing the rate of consumption, knowing the levels and being able to address it, I think is a wonderful tool to reduce agronomists' anxiety and farmers' anxiety about their fertility program. Jarrett, talk to us a little bit about how you see this getting implemented, where it's going to grow, who's going to be using it, and then you can kind of extrapolate into that. What are some of the real world examples of things that you could have eureka moments in the field, and how's it going to change addressing fertility?
Well, I'm not. Maybe have to go through those one by one again because that's above my pay grade to remember all your questions, Dan. But I'll kind of go to the sort of the last one first. In fact, I just as Terry was talking, I just pulled up some stuff. The eureka moments. I would have to say that the first eureka moments was when we internally released the NutriScan tissue to our internal sales team here at the end of April, and both to our US and Canadian group. And our US group, of course, already has winter wheat out there. And I believe within 24 hours of the team leaving our meeting, we had all of our reps having sampled winter wheat actually saying, I can't believe it, we're deficient in phosphorus. And this guy would say, I can't believe it, we're deficient in potassium. I can't deficient, this field we're deficient in copper. And now guess what happens? They're going to that retailer and they're going, hey, you got a great looking crop, you're off in this, let's react now. So I think what we're seeing is just incredible response time. And now you're actually having, rather than what do you think? What do I think? Now it's like, here's some information that is showing, as Terry said, there's trends that we're seeing this trend across this area. So let's get on it right now. And if you're not sure, we'll go out to that field right away and we'll get the results done. So I know our guys primarily in Montana and Southern Alberta are really the only ones that have crops in the field that they can test. And they are seeing a lot of phosphorus, a lot of potassium deficiencies, no surprise. And then from there, it's kind of bouncing around. As Terry said, virtually no nitrogen, a little bit of sulfur. Those kind of, those other ones aren't as common, but the P and the K are coming around. We had a great tissue result that came back, I think, 2 days ago. One of our reps was out sampling some peas, early young peas. So no surprise. Has nodulation happened? No, because the peas are very young. And guess what? Guess what the tissue sample said? You're nitrogen deficient. Should you panic? Or should you say, that's exactly what I want? So to me, that creates, with that rep that we have, that creates a high level of confidence that that tool is actually working because it's showing the plant's nitrogen deficient, which means what's going to happen? It's going to start fixing nitrogen. It's going to that relationship with rhizobium. So where do I see this going? Who's using this? Well, again, I think it's people that are walking fields. It's people who's going to use this tool. It's people that are walking fields, people that care about their crop, that want to invest in their crop. And again, collecting data, not using it doesn't mean much. But if you have real-time data, then you can have real-time decisions. And I think that's one of the growing pains we've had over the years is not being able to react when you have to wait. And as Dimitri, I think, said, if you get a bad result, you can just go back and go do another result to see maybe I did a bad example. So who's using the tool? I would say anybody walking fields, whether that is an agronomist, an independent crop consultant, a retailer, growers. I think it's stewarded the people that are managing that field. When I can't remember your other questions that you had there, Dan. So I think
that's it.
I think if we come back to the eureka moment, we've had all of our guys have been in the field. They've done scans, and they're going, "Wow, this is really amazing." A lot of times, hey, the crop's looking great, perfect. You know what I mean? So we're getting a lot of those stories. We're talking maybe about some nutrient. I'm talking about some nutrient imbalance stories, but there's a lot of great stories that the crop is looking fantastic. And again, Dimitri said it earlier. We've got 2 years of calibration, first year's commercial. As that data set grows, and then the machine learning kicks in, the accuracy gets better. And we're addressing some of the areas where we need to improve, because this mousetrap is always evolving. And I think the key thing is, if you wait for the perfect model, again, it's kind of like when you buy a TV, the brand new TV is, $7,000, and 6 months later it's $600 because the next version's out. I mean, if you're waiting for the perfect piece of equipment, I think you get into it, start working with it, start learning it, start doing repetitions, and start seeing the trends. And I think that's where, and then what happens, and then we start having conversations around plant nutrition. And I would prefer to have conversations around plant nutrition rather than what herbicide to use to kill a weed, because there's a blue book that tells you what herbicide there is to kill a weed. And again, so I think this is going to have more intense, productive conversations on what we should be doing with that field, based off not getting overwhelmed with data, but having data that we can react on right away and discuss right away.
I like what Jarrett said when he said we need to become a plant nutritionist, not just agronomists. We need to become plant nutritionists. And I remember reading this article about the farmer in the States who had a really high corn crop. I don't remember, something close to 300 something bushel. And he said that he did tissue sampling every week. I know it is too much to have a tissue testing every week, but he did that, and he spent lots of time understanding the biochemistry and what is happening, the physiology of the crop, and this is how he achieved what he achieved. So, we need to set specific targets, and then we need to decide how we can go there.
You think of the cost of an education, and Elston talking about how, the best education you could get is testing the old leaves and the new leaves, and the capacity of this to do this is almost endless. That's a great education. Terry, you got some points to make here?
Yeah, just to kind of add to what the guys said, it's a lot like Malcolm Gladwell's, it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something, right? And I think with a lot of times with tissue testing, initially you guys maybe just do 1 or 2 tests, and you'll use potassium as an example. You might do a test early on in the season, very early on, and you might be low because the soil's cold and the roots aren't growing. But, at that mid stage, you might have an excess of potassium in the plant, and so you think it's good. You test it later on when you're getting into yield production and the plant's really demanding a high amount of potassium, it'll be low, right? And so depending on what time of the year you took it and what's going on, you're going to have different readings. And if you only took one sample, or a couple at a different times of the year, and that's all you looked at, you'd be really confused, right? But as you start doing more, you start understanding the trends of what's going on, and that's where just the access to more data. Another example where tissue test is extremely valuable over soil tests is in sulfur, and why we've used it so much in the Aberhart Ag Network and proving out biosols. Sulfur soil sampling, there's a lot of variability in the field. So you could hit a couple high spots in your soil sample, and it'll show that you have lots of sulfur in the field, but maybe 80% of the field is deficient, and you hit a couple really high spots, right? But when you go to tissue sample, you're taking from the plant in the season, you're proving whether the crop is getting that nutrient or not at that time. And it's going to change, depending on the conditions and what's going on. So again, just the more data that we can get, the more we learn. And you're never going to learn more unless you spend more time and working towards that 10,000 hours, maybe not 10,000 hours of tissue testing, but maybe 10,000 tests.
10,000 tissue tests. I love that. That's very good.
And just
We're getting some questions coming in here.
Sorry, Dan, just to give you a tip about, because you're doing tissue testing on for your clients who use BioSul, you don't expect to have the same report if the soil is wet or dry, because sulfur moves in the plant with water. So keep that in mind and give this recommendation to your clients. Like maybe they need to take the tissue samples when the soil is wet and the nutrient can become available to the plants, because you might have enough sulfur, but if it is dry, it won't get inside the plants. And they will think, oh my God, like we don't have enough sulfur in our crops. So that's something we need to remember when we do tissue sampling, like boron, nitrogen, sulfur, they become available with soil moisture.
Well, that really speaks well to a question that I have here about some of the nuances of tissue testing that maybe you guys can speak to. And we're fortunate enough in our history of thousands of tissue tests, we've seen more than adequate sulfur with Biosol, and Justin here is a customer as well. Justin Shepard is commenting, we have 7 years of tissue testing history. Good for you, man. And summer weather makes a huge difference in interpreting the test results, as you just said, Dimitris. One of the challenges with current tissue testing is that time of day sampling impacts the results. Will the new technology resolve that, or sampling consistency in general helps? Question mark. Who wants to take that?
No. Yeah. So great question. So the answer is no. I mean, the fact is that's a physiological effect on the plant. I mean, when that plant, when it gets hot in the day, that plant shuts down. It doesn't respire. It's kind of gets a little bit in defensive mode, so to speak. And as a result, the nutrient accumulation in the plant is not representative of the health of the plant. So you still cannot sample in the afternoon. You got to sample in the morning after the dew and before the heat of the day. We also have done some really neat calibration work where we've actually made the plants wet. And what we have seen, the dampness on the leaves with the scanner, is that there's 2 nutrients. One of them is nitrogen, and my apology, I can't remember the second nutrient, but there's another nutrient. The number actually gets slightly altered with wet leaves. So again, in our best management practice, you have to wipe the leaf to be sure that it's clear soil and that it's clear of moisture. So really, at the end of the day, the sampling technique and the timing of collection, the tool doesn't overcome plant physiology.
Love it. Well, we got 10 minutes to go here to the top of the hour. If things are really heating up here as far as the agronomic debate, sometimes we can maybe extend it a little bit, but I like to respect all the Trekkies' time on the call today. But we had some extensive comments here from Javier. I hope I said your name right. Hi, I'm Javier. I'm really bad at this. I'm from Spain. Welcome from Spain. I used to work in different agro markets and labs, and I always do an analogy with flight engineers who build planes. They know they need wings, they need cables, they need steel, they need design, and they join all of it, and they have a plane. If they have an issue, they research and address it. In agriculture, we need similar things. However, when we join all, we have a nutritional plan which works for this conditions in similar conditions and crops. It doesn't work. The difference is an agronomist works with biovariables when flight engineers only work with inert variables. As Jarrett said, to have something is better than nothing, but we were speaking about agriculture and we haven't developed proper tech to make we can control as much of the variables as we have to control. We need to use this tech as a junction of all, the interpretation of what is in the soil, what I give to the soil, and what the plant is available to take and assimilate. In general, it isn't about the soil or tissue testing. It is about how we approach the interpretation of all and give sense to use it in a democrative way. Love that. What do you think? Sorry to be so long. I agree with Jarrett, but what we need is the interpretation of those data. Everybody working in the field need that data, but the question is, do they understand this data? How we transmit this education? What maybe this technology will educate us more so we get better as we go. Maybe we're getting close to final comments here. Give me some final thoughts here, guys. Let's go around the horn.
So I think there's a couple pieces that I should add about the NutriScan is that we created critical tissue concentrations in the plant, minimum and maximum attention levels. And we actually went to 6 labs. We looked at all of their data at the different growth stages in the plant's life cycle. We looked at some of these even high yield growers that have a different level of critical tissue concentration. We know where those are. Those didn't really get put into the algorithm. But really, I think that's a great point. We used the data that is public knowledge that people are using today to create our attention levels. So again, we're trying to harmonizing what the industry is used to. So I think that's a very interesting piece. The one piece that I will add, I know that over the years, most people, Terry said it earlier, a lot of people take one tissue sample and they get frustrated with it because they go to a field and there's a really sick looking plant there. They do a tissue sample and it comes back perfect nutrient balance. Everybody in the call has seen many of those. And again, you got to, dig into the details here of the science. We got to remember that a nutrient analysis measures the concentration in the plant. And so if you have a small biomass versus a very large biomass, it's still measuring the concentration in the plant. And the purpose of a plant is to reproduce at least keep its species alive, so produce at least a minimum of 1 seed or 1 kernel. So outside of a few nutrients, a plant will completely shut down and rebalance itself to be sure that it can survive. Well, if you waited that long and then you do a tissue concentration just in that area, tissue test in that area, there's a chance that a really sick looking plant actually will have perfect nutrition. Don't get frustrated. But don't go to those areas. Go to the different areas of the field where, as Dimitri said earlier, you don't see the visual responses, but it's probably expressing the same thing as the other areas. So I think that's one of the biggest issues that I've seen over the years why people don't tissue sample is they do one test and they're not seeing a difference. And it doesn't make any sense because the plant looks terrible. With this tool, you can now go to different production areas. You can go to high and low areas. You can actually then start comparing and start seeing what's going on. And I always say in those really sick areas, do a soil sample. In a sick area, the soil sample may be more valuable than the tissue sample. But if you do both of them right at the same time, now you got a whole bunch, you got real-time data. It's not overwhelming. And now you can decide what you're going to do with it.
That reminds me of a comment from Greg Patterson from A&L Labs on our Tissue Testing for Success webinar 10 months ago, 11 months ago, where he said, tissue testing will drive you nuts for many reasons. Final thoughts, Dimitris? Yeah.
I'm very excited about this technology, and I have some different plans some different things that I want to try. One of the things that I always wanted to look is if we can apply some extra nitrogen after the flag leaf to wheat if we want to improve protein levels. I have never done it because it's always a challenging season and challenging period for me. I don't have too much time, and most of the times when you can collect flag leaves, farmer wants to apply something next day. So I plan to use this technology to determine if we can improve the protein levels on cereals, and this is one of the things that I want to try. And I'm very, very curious to see and to have a report, a soil test report, and old leaves, new leaves. I think we can build some case studies that we can spend some more time in the winter, and we can learn and unlearn and relearn, as Elston always says. It's a great tool. We can only become better agronomists using these technologies, and better farmers for the farmers. And I have to say, it's extremely easy to use. Like, I have done some tissue scanning already. It's so easy to use. And it's for everyone. As Jarrett says, it's for everyone who walks the fields.
I see this on every farm in the future. Yeah. I mean, that's where it's starting. Jarrett, you had something else to share?
Well, unfortunately, I usually have too much to share, so I have to be respectful of people's times. Dimitri, great comment on the nitrogen, and to put a plug in for our algorithms. Nothing against the other nutrients, but the algorithm for nitrogen is unbelievable. I believe the R squared value is over 0.9. So it is incredibly well calibrated for nitrogen. Again, why? because the NIR technology has been used for protein analysis and animal feed for a long time. So there is years of data. And we see that with nitrogen, we see this with potassium and some of the other elements. It's incredible, the responses. Some elements need improvement, which is, again, what I want to say. The tool is not perfect, but there's some really good elements there that get some good learnings. And that's a great comment on the protein. I actually didn't think about that one until you said that's going to be a pretty cool piece to learn about. In regards to the piece, again, I think Dimitri has said a lot. I'll just stop talking and let Terry talk unless there's other questions.
Terry, if we were meeting here 1 year from now, in regards to digital tissue testing, what has to have happened for this to be a success for you in your mind?
Well, we're just going to go and learn some more stuff. And I think it's probably not a very profound statement, but yeah, we just got to continue getting out in the field, getting data, learning more things so we can make better decisions. And if you don't understand something, you can, either kind of walk away from it or ignore it or let someone else figure it out and have that advantage. But yeah, we're just going to continue to look at how we can grow better crops, do it in a more efficient way, and grow higher quality, better crops. And that's what we're here to do. So the more data that we have over time, the more things that we learn, and the more we learn, the more we realize there's more to learn. So just get at her.
The Dunning-Kruger effect from my friend Mike Pommier. One more thing, Jarrett.
A couple of things. Just a couple of plugs here. The unit, we decided to calibrate it for the four main crops grown in our trading area, which hopefully is a lot of your clients, which is the cereals, the canola, the corn, and the soybeans. We have been doing some work on peas. In fact, in the last week, when the peas have been coming up, we've been looking at some pea data and cross-referencing against soybean data. So that's going to be really fun, and that's going to be part of the evolution. So we really targeted the four main crops, but again, we're continuing to evolve those. We're now looking at the next level of crops. For some of your users here, we kind of forgot in all of this, when you use the scanner, you're not paying per scan. It's a subscription-based model. So you can do one scan, or you can do, there's Terry's goal, 10,000 scans. And basically it's a subscription. It's like a cell phone. There's no long distance charges. There's no roaming charges. It's just a flat fee. And again, the unit, the new hardware that we released just over a year ago, as our guys have been calibrating, they actually will scan 2 days straight, calibrating without having to recharge the battery. So again, it's quick. The battery life is really cool. And again, do it again because it doesn't cost. There's no incremental cost. If you do 100 samples, there's no upcharge. If you do 500 samples, no upcharge. You can do as many samples as you want. So again, I think that wasn't really highlighted. So that's the idea here. So it's for everybody. And again, unfortunately, the more you use it, the more you learn. And the great news is the more you use it, it doesn't cost you anymore. It costs you your time, but your time is very valuable because you can help grow a better crop today and next year and the years after that.
We had a lot of agronomists on the call here today, Jarrett. How do folks get their hands on one? What's the best way to get a hold of you or your team?
So, well, actually, I don't really know the workings, how an order actually happens. So it'd be really bad to give an order to me because I would completely screw it up. But again, if we go, again, we can either call our office or go online. We have a full-time product manager on it. We have actually 3 people. So Sim Singh is our product manager on it. We also have Wayne Ralston, Dan Owen, Warren, Pablo. We actually have 3 people that are full-time onboarding people to calibrate it out. We have the units in stock. The way we do it is we get them to you. You get the order form, so you can just go online to our website, get the order form, talk to us, phone to us. We'll work through all the details. We'll get it to you right away, and then we calibrate. We get you on board. We get all the credentials, everything set up behind the scenes, and then we do as much practicing and demos as we need. But after about 1 or 2 of them, it's just like, okay, this was actually pretty straightforward, and I can even run it. So that's a pretty good indication. Not that hard.
Even for a Luddite. Hey, well, thanks to everybody that came on the call. Thanks to all the panelists. I really had a lot of fun doing this. It's a great conversation. I'm excited about all the rain that we've had and the crops are popping up. We see so much potential across Western Canada. There's a renewed optimism about agriculture. And please check out our family of companies online, aberhartfarms.com, suregrowth.ca, convergencegrowth.com, and aberhartagsolutions.ca, and go to ATP Nutrition on the internet to get your unit and have fun tissue testing in the future. It was really fun, guys. Thanks for coming on. It was awesome. And we're going to put this recording on YouTube for folks to watch right into, the 2200s, 2300s, 2400s, centuries to come in the Federation.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan, for having
us. Thanks, guys. Great job.
Thank you.
Happy growing. Happy.
Bye for
Take
now.
Care. All the best.
Bye now.